Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful day so far, and I'm excited for this game week. I really, really am. Today, I have for you solving the problems. We will be looking at many benching dilemmas. We will be looking at Urian Timber and Gabriel Jesus. We'll be looking at the forwards and which of the Jackson replacements I've recommended I have as the best, as well as justifying my Cole Palmer captaincy and looking at the Isak captaincy for some of you who are thinking about that. Some did mention it in the comments. Before we hop into the video, if you like it, please do drop a like on it. And if you have not subscribed around here, whether you're new or a regular viewer, consider doing so as we approach 6,000 subscribers. Without anything else needing to be said, however, let's get into it. One thing that actually does deserve a mention in the introduction is that I have listened. I am going to order a mic stand. And from there, I expect the audio quality, just like everyone else's, to be consistent and solid in its output. And you won't have those gaps of no sound, which I think you will certainly enjoy considering the comment section. Now let's get into it. Now, I already know that many of you will disagree with this selection. Many of you will disagree with this analysis. And I'm not really trying to sway you here. However, as a content creator, I think it's necessary to justify my selection, especially when I'm going against the grain in such a big manner. And who knows, maybe I'll get a few of you on board and we will revel in the ecstasy that is to potentially follow. Right. When I was watching Southampton versus Crystal Palace, I noticed that Southampton were building a 3, similar to how Chelsea will build. And Eze Sar Mateta went man-to-man in the high press. However, it wasn't just exclusive to them. Whereas with Leicester, for example, I would say at times it was exclusive to Mavididi against Manchester City. Mitchell jumped and he looked to press Bree very aggressively. So when he received the ball, similarly, Jefferson Lerma jumped from the pivot to press whenever one of the Southampton sixes came to show. And considering what Chelsea also built in like a 3-1, where you can have Caicedo showing and we will have that diamond in midfield whereby it could just be him. Obviously, it could be a 3-2 as well, but I'm just going to assume for now it's just him. It's going to be a very similar setup from Palace, I think. However, I would say we have better players on the ball, and I would say our players are more press resistant. It would be wonderful if Romeo Lavia could even get a 30-minute cameo because he's probably the best when it comes to those two qualities in our side, but I don't expect him to play. I think Reece James is ready for minutes, but maybe not Lavia considering what Maresca said in the press conference. So from there, I think we can turn them over quite a bit. Will we lose the ball at times? Yeah, probably. Can they profit from that? Definitely. But as I mentioned yesterday, from an FPL standpoint specifically, I don't really care about how many goals we concede. Obviously, I do from a Sanchez standpoint, but from an FPL standpoint, if the game wants to be 8-8, right, and Palmer's going to score all 8 because he's going to get all these opportunities, that's great for myself. Now, what I would like to say as well is that when we turn them over in this fashion, considering Palace play a 3-4-3, they won't have as many numbers in the middle. And I think this is where Palmer can really hurt them because now he'll be afforded a little bit more space. You see against Everton, right? 4-5-1, he's always playing in front of those two lines. And when he is in between those two lines, the circulation into him is cut. And it's so minimal because there's such little space there. Whereas I don't think you'll see this problem as much with Palace. Then you take a slight look at the statistics. And over the last 4 gamings, I think Palace are ranked maybe 12th or 13th for big chances conceded, which I think is pretty decent. Going into the fixture with that type of statistic for Palmer. And I like that. You compare it to Man United, and we'll come on to Salah next in the next slide. And they're far better in that regard. There's also one variable which I think has really allowed me to at least justify to myself why I cannot captain Mohamed Salah this week. So yeah, that's basically my analysis on Cole Palmer. I do think we'll be able to turn them over, and then he'll be able to hurt them because there's not going to be as much of the space protected, nor will he be man-marked in the same way that he has been in the past. And to be honest, I don't mind a man-to-man high press all across the pitch if that's what Palace want to do, if we're high, because I think Palmer's good enough just to bypass that even in comparison to just dueling in some capacity with his man. So yeah, I'm quite bullish on what Cole Palmer can do, and that's essentially my justification for it. One other thing I could have mentioned on that slide is, 1, he's a damn good footballer, and 2, I actually think his performances as of late, let's say take the one against Ipswich, were warranting of a return, at least in comparison to the blank which shown on screen following the game. Now, let's talk about Mohamed Salah. And there's maybe 1/2 things which I'm really placing my bets on. United have had 2 games this season under Amorim where I think their status and currently where they're at allows them to take a slightly different approach. So, for example, Bournemouth, I would say right now Bournemouth are a better team than them. They obviously beat them 3-0 at Old Trafford as well. But I think given the name of Manchester United, given how they will feel about that game, they probably took a little bit onus, and it was reflecting. For example, Man United had 60% possession, right? However, against Arsenal, against Manchester City, when they travelled there, there's not an expectation from their fans, nor pretty much anyone, for them to dominate that game and be the side taking it to the other team, right? And I actually think that works to their advantage. It was two very competent defensive displays away at Arsenal and away at Manchester City, when they're allowed to be compact, when they can pretty much solely rely on their transitional threat. Obviously, against City at times they were building, and City would go back into their block, specifically at the start of the second half. But especially Arsenal away, which this game will be more like, in my opinion, because Liverpool will be at a much higher level than Manchester City were. I think they'll set up in that fashion. Then, when you look at the players that are likely to start on Sunday, especially in the context of what they're going to look to do and not try and dominate the ball, and Liverpool aren't going to exactly set up in this deep block, which they'll have to break down. Maguire, Yoro, Ugarte, Mainu, Hoyland, Ahmad, Bruno, Dalot, and Mazraoui as wing-backs who won't really be required to get forward as much, but will probably be tasked with more defensive responsibilities. I think that's fine. Honestly, I think that's a set of players which is very solid, and I back them to make it a little bit tough for Liverpool to lose. If they can get through the first 20 minutes, and that's a big thing at Anfield, if you can get through the first 20 and you can quiet the crowd a bit, then you can kind of get through the game far easier. But if they get an early goal, Liverpool, then it will be a real test of Man United's resilience and their mentality. So I'm kind of just hoping they get through the first 20, and then with the structure they boast, with the compactness that they've shown away at Arsenal, for example, I do think that this could genuinely work, and that's essentially why I'm not captaining Mohamed Salah. Now, of course, he's probably the best player in the world at the moment. Liverpool are arguably the best team in Europe at the moment. There's so many things going for them and for Salah, but when you take the strategic element into account and the footballing reasons I've discussed, and that's one thing. Last week, it was very much more strategy-based. This week is genuinely more football-based with a touch of strategy, maybe a bit more than a touch, but with a touch of strategy at least. And that's why I'm captaining Cole Palmer. So that's the justification for myself, at least. You can, of course, interpret that however you please. Moving on to Isak as a potential captaincy choice. Some of you have asked about this in the comments, and I've just seen some general discourse about this. Personally, for me, no. Mainly because he's a forward. And that's pretty much the only thing I have to say. From a football standpoint, everything makes sense. There's no Aria, there's no Van der Ven, there's no Romero, there's no Ben Davis, there's no Udogie. Newcastle are flying. Spurs are doing quite the opposite. They're sinking at the moment. And he's in red hot form. Newcastle look great. The attacking dynamics look great, given now he's switched Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali. For all of those reasons, it makes sense. It's just the fact that he's a forward and Salah and Palmer both exist. And I don't think I'm ready yet to take either of them on, because I still need to see a little bit more from someone else to take them on. For example, like Isak scores a hat-trick against Ipswich and Salah still outscores him, right? So to go against one of these mids, especially considering they get an extra point for the goal, an extra point for the clean sheet, side keep one, I prefer going for Palmer in my case. Would I go Salah or Isak? If you are adamant you don't want to captain Salah, well, I personally would go Salah out of the two, even if you are adamant and you're probably just going to go to Isak regardless, right? But yeah, I would captain Salah out of him and Isak, but for me, it's going to be Cole Palmer this week. There are many benching dilemmas to solve, so let's start with Joao Pedro and Arsenal defense. If you have double Arsenal defense, obviously assuming one of them isn't Timber because he's suspended, I would be starting both of them and benching Joao Pedro. I'm all about maximizing your upside, not in every spot. So, for example, if you've got a defender playing an attacker and both of them have a decent likelihood of getting an attacking return, and the other guy really just isn't an option and it's such a low probability that he gets any type of return, then yeah, you can start both. But in this case, where I think many are afforded the luxury of choosing, I would start double Arsenal defense, because even if you were to start Joao Pedro, you can't maximize your upside because you're not going to be able to bench the other Arsenal defender simply due to the lack of depth our squads have this week through the Cunha suspension, the Bowen injury, the Morgan Rogers suspension, the Timber suspension, right, and so on. So I would start both just from a standpoint of maximizing your upside. However, if you have one Arsenal defender, I would just assume it's Gabriel, and Joao Pedro, then what do you do? And I think this is very much situational. Some of you will view it as Gabriel is the biggest box threat in the league. He plays for the best defense in the league. It makes a lot of sense just to start him. He will cover a huge amount of risk if you are to bench him because he's got super high EO. So just start him and bench Joao Pedro. For me personally, I think with Timber out, that takes away a lot from this Arsenal defense, considering it's at the Amex and Brighton have been good against these bigger teams. Joao Pedro has been the giant slayer. The fact that in general, I really do like to play attackers over defenders. I would start Joao Pedro and bench Gabriel when it's just a one-on-one split. It's also a double-edged sword for the upside, because not only will you gain the points from Joao Pedro, especially only over non-owners, but also those with double Arsenal defense will lose out. So maybe your defender can do better and you profit in both cases, right? I really like the upside that you get there. I think it's a pretty unique situation as well. And so for those reasons, I'd start Joao Pedro, on top of the fact that I do genuinely think Brighton will score. But if not, then I would say just start Gabriel. But ideally, I would not start both. I would rather play 4-4-2 and bench Joao Pedro to maximize my upside and play 3-4-3 and, let's say, leave Lewis Hall on the bench just to kind of cover both cases in the Brighton Arsenal game. Should you be playing Lewis Hall? On one hand, I really do think the Spurs attack deserves slightly more respect than it's been given. I'm not saying to crown them as the best attack in the league and that they're 100% going to score and it's a stupid decision to start Hall, but Son, Solanke, Kulusevski, Maddison, Johnson, Bentancur, that deserves a bit more respect, especially at home with the way that Spurs play. They're always going to be in and around the goals, right? Especially if you only need to get one. So I think you must have a little bit more respect for that than the general consensus probably does at the moment. Secondly, there is also no Fabian Schär. I know Sven Botman's available for selection. How fit he really is, I don't know. Eddie Howe's notorious for lying in his press conferences anyway. But regardless, even if he is to come back inside, very helpful on the assumption that he does. But again, first game back, right, and Spurs will be an intense game. I would expect a good performance from a good centre-back. But, you have to take into account his situation slightly. On the other hand, he's in superb form, as on Newcastle. Everything points to them not just beating Spurs, but beating them by quite a bit. And it's the attacking returns which really make this such a tantalizing prospect, especially considering others might bench him. One, his attacking returns are likely to be paired with Isak and Gordon. You look at the assists, for example, he's got recently, who crosses into Alexander Isak, who plays on the same flank as Anthony Gordon. Some of you may own just Isak, some of you will own both Isak and Gordon and Hall. So pairing those combinations allows you to, again, maximize your upside as much as possible. And in general, it's not the fact that he can just pair them, but look at his routes to points. He takes set pieces. He can overlap. He can underlap. It's like these short distance passes is where someone will carry and then shoot. It's crosses. It's shots and shots from different angles, right? Across the keeper with his left foot, coming in on his right foot, took one against Onana in a similar fashion. Wasn't exactly close to scoring, but it was on target. It was a decent shot, right? And just very sound technically as well. So all of those actions in those spaces are somewhat dangerous, and they're all routes to returns that are somewhat realistic, unlike some of the other fullbacks, I would say. So when that's present, I think there's a lot of upside to be had there. You essentially just have to judge if he is to, not keep a clean sheet, then how likely is the attacking return? And in general, how likely is a clean sheet? I'm pretty comfortable playing him at this point. Given the upside on offer and given the fact that even if he concedes, I can genuinely see him getting an attacking return against pretty much anyone at the moment. But I'm going to now talk about other players who he's in contention with and what I think about them. For example, Daniel Munoz, who I would definitely bench for Lewis Hall. Before we analyze the rest of the benching dilemmas, for those looking for a little bit more in any sense, this community could certainly provide you with that. You will indeed be receiving FPL help from myself and the other brilliant people within that community. You will, of course, as well, be receiving the football analysis that I provide. But more so than that, I think the real value lies in just engaging and being part of that type of community with so many brilliant people in there. There's a real good feel factor within the group at the moment, and I can imagine that only grows, and it's been wonderful to experience. For anyone who has any questions, drop me a line on X, drop me a DM, drop me an email. I will happily answer them. And consider just joining for a month. And if you don't like it, by all means, cancel after that month. In terms of FPL, I would say there's minimal downside to that, but a lot of upside. Who knows? Maybe you just get one tip which transforms your season from any one of the guys in there who all love FPL and therefore are thinking about it, or you establish a new relationship, or you just enjoy the feel-good factor that is in there because it really is present. So, like I said, just consider it. And if you have any questions, just drop me a line. In nearly all cases, I would be benching Daniel Munoz. I think we've got a lot of firepower. And with the way they press and how they've been defending as of late, by no means bad. I just don't think it's excellent. I think we should score. And especially when you consider him versus Lewis Hall, I would say Lewis Hall's got more for him at the moment. The other thing is Daniel Munoz is a defender. And I know some of you are considering starting or benching a midfielder instead of him because of his attacking threat. Whilst I completely agree, this is absolutely present and he could get an attacking return, I would say there are probably better games for him to get an attacking return than this one. I would be playing Ismaila Sarr though. However, I think Palace can certainly hurt us, like I spoke about in the captaincy section. And again, the midfielders who people are considering benching, Bruno, Ahmad, Semenyo, I would play them pretty much always over a defender. Maybe okay, fine, like a Trent or even a Gabriel if you're very bullish on the Arsenal defense. Yeah, absolutely. That's understandable. But for these cheaper defenders, I really would be playing my midfielders or attackers. Now, When it comes to Timber and Gabriel Jesus, a lot of people are questioning whether they should be selling and buying. When it comes to Timber, I think this is a sell. One, your squad is a little bit thin for this week, so it might be beneficial to take him out and just allow yourself to have that upgrade and allow yourself to maybe capture a little bit more upside because you now have a better player who can do that for you. Not only that, he acts as a big blocker to a lot of assets, to the Trents, to the Van Dijks, but also because he's quite expensive. Some of the other midfield and forward options you could potentially access with the cash that's locked in there. There's enough cheap, good defenders as well to downgrade. And Arsenal's fixture run after this, from a defensive standpoint, isn't easy. It includes Villa at home, Spurs at home, City away, all in the next 5. And I just wouldn't say that's the best run. I think decreasing your risk because you probably own Gabriel and not having that much of exposure to Arsenal defense within these fixtures would, in my opinion, be more sensible. Right. When it comes to Gabriel Jesus, I actually quite like him. I think from an attacking standpoint, the fixtures are fine. I think he should continue to get minutes at 9. He looks sharp. So I like it. I don't love it because I'm not sure I trust Arsenal's attacking dynamics and himself as a finisher just yet enough to say I love it, but I certainly do like it, and I can see the upside associated with this type of move. Obviously, you would have to sell one of the more popular forward assets and avoid some of the more popular forward assets, but I guess you have to do that with anyone. I would just say if you are going to go here, just make sure you have at least some strong sense of conviction, because all of a sudden, if he gets benched and his price starts to fall and you have to make this move, especially with double game getting closer and closer, it's not really a spot you want to find yourself in. At least if you go Mateta, Wood, Wissa, who we're all going to discuss in the next slide, you kind of know that you're getting starts regularly and pretty much every week. One other thing I would say about Gabriel Jesus is, whilst from a stylistic standpoint, the fixtures are probably decent, I think you must respect the quality of the opposition that they're going to face and factor that in. Now, quite a few of you asked me to discuss the 3 because you're looking to bring one of them in and you only have what? I would have Chris Wood above Joao Wissa. Now, in isolation, I like Wissa, and I've expressed my interest in owning him at some point in the season because I do like him as an asset. Look at the way Brentford play. Look at the positions he takes up. He's been good this season as well. But for me, I'd say Wood has a better fixture run in the medium term. I know we spoke about Brentford's fixtures and how they're better than what the FDR shows, but I would still say Chris Wood's are better. I also trust him a little bit more, and I think I trust Forest just a little bit more as well. But mainly, I trust Wood. And the fact that he's on penalties as well, which Joao Wissa is not. So again, there's nothing wrong with Joao Wissa. I think Chris Wood's just got too much going for him at the moment. Mateta is an interesting one because he doesn't have the form, especially this season, that either of these two have. And then he's obviously got some competition with Nketiah, albeit I think his expected minutes will be fine. However, he's got the best set of fixtures, undoubtedly, I would say, and they last for a very long time, especially even the immediate term, right after Chelsea home, which I don't even think is bad by any stretch. You get Leicester away, and they'll be without Hermansen, which I think is a pretty big deal. He's obviously more expensive, though, however, so there's a lot of good bits and bad bits associated with it. I think if you're going to go there, Overwood, just make sure you have strong conviction. Make sure you've watched Palace at least somewhat, and you trust that there's the soft signs, as we've discussed in the past, that he's going to start return. I think he'll be pretty good, but I do accept that there is a risk that he hasn't come good yet, and it's not like he's looking like scoring a hat-trick a game, albeit still looking dangerous, and who knows how long this lasts for. So I like it. I probably like him more than Joao Wissa. Between him and Wood, it's pretty close. If I personally had to choose, I'm going Chris Wood just slightly at the moment, but I don't think anyone can tell you it's a bad pick. That is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. All she wrote for Gameweek 20's content. If you enjoyed the video, do drop a like on it. Similarly, if you have not subscribed yet, consider pressing the button as we approach 6,000 subscribers, a feat which would be magnificent in such a short space of time. It is set to be a very interesting week, and I'm sure transfer plans on Sunday will be very interesting as well. Like I said, I'm certainly excited for it, and I wish you the best of luck for the game week ahead. Have a wonderful weekend, and I shall see you on the other side. Good luck and goodbye.